Hello, again. Welcome back to my show. Um, Today's topic is Iron Man again. And for those of you who remember, those of you who don't remember from last time, yeah, how many would not? I finally got this thing put together. Yeah, it looks pretty good, doesn't it? No, it doesn't. It doesn't have a coat of paint on it. But before we can paint it, well, before I can paint it, you're going to just watch it, aren't you? Before I can paint it, I'm going to have to fill in the seams. All up and down the legs, the sides of the body, and the arms, and some on the head. There are seams everywhere on this model. Of course, any model is going to have seams, unless it's something, just so well engineered that you don't have any seams. Like the Tamiya P51 Mustang, for instance. You can put that together with no putty, if you're careful. Same way with the Fine Molds X-Wing and Y-Wing kits, and their TIE Fighter. Yeah, there's a lot of kits that you can put together that don't need putty. Unfortunately, this is not one of them. I might do one of those eventually, just to take a break. But for now, I'm going to have to putty the seams first. Then I'm going to paint it with primer, and finally get to the main color combination. And I'm going to try to get that done today. Get it down to the color. I know I said that before regarding primer on at least the X-Wing video, but I'm going to definitely, honestly try to do that today, even if it takes longer than 45 minutes to do so. So, how about we get to it? Okay, I figured while I was at this, I would demonstrate two different fillers that I like to use. The Bondo glazing and spot putty, and the Aves epoxy paste. These are two different kinds of putties, and so they're relatively they can be used to demonstrate two different kinds of putties, basically. The first is the one-part putty, like Bondo. Bondo, you can just spread it on your seam, and it will give you a rough finish. Then you just sand it later after it dries. But the problem is that these kind of putties are part putty, part suspension solution. So you're going to have to, if you have too much putty on your seam, it's going to shrink and crack, and that is not desirable. You really only use spot putty for, well, spots, or for seam filling. And even then, you want to be careful with just how big of a seam you're trying to fill. If it's one of those gargantuan seams from an old 80s kit, you want to use something else, anything else besides a one-part putty. You want to use something like a two-part putty. This Aves epoxy paste is made by the same company that makes the Aves sculpting putty that I used earlier on the Iron Man kit. And you mix an equal part of A and B very thoroughly with something disposable like this little piece of wood that I found on the floor. So first of all, I'm going to show you how I apply Bondo to a model. I take a piece of spare cardboard or something like this, take the cap off, and squeeze out a little bit of the Bondo. For a red model like this is actually pretty useful. I mean, it's already red. And then just spread it all over the model. You want to beware with areas that have high detail on them, that this stuff will fill in detail and fill around it. I'm using the bottom half of the legs for demonstrating this, both bottom halves, because I want the finish to be even. And using two different putties, I'm not really sure if it's going to be even if I do one leg with Aves and one with Bondo. So, And by the way, I'm probably going to be branded a heretic of the Church of Aves on Starship Modeler forums, but I don't care. Okay, that I think takes care of the seam. Now, after you get the Bondo applied, take a flat surface that you're going to be throwing away later and scrape off some of the Bondo, the excess. You want to use a disposable surface, by the way. You do not want to get this stuff on your hands. It takes forever to wash out, and it's a pain in the neck to deal with. It'll be on your hands all evening. And I've already used up that surface, so I'm gonna have to borrow something else. If you put a thin coat of Bondo on something, it's going to dry fairly quickly. It won't be set, however. It'll still be kind of squishy, but you won't be able to smooth it out as easily. So go in sections when you use Bondo. Aves, on the other hand, has a working time of about 1 to 3 hours, depending on how much you spread on there. So you can use that quite a bit. The downside, of course, is the fact that a long drying time is a double-edged sword. You have a lot of working time, but you also can't touch the model for several hours after you apply the putty. Well, that it looks rough, of course. Ugh, got some on my fingers. It looks rough, of course, but once you sand it down, Bondo is really good for small seams like that. Now let's get to the Aves. I haven't used this particular bottle before, so yeah, you can see here it has a tabbed piece of foil. Even though you're not going to be cutting it, you still want to grab your X-Acto to lift that up, just in case your fingernails can't get it. And if it's low like this, and the cap, come on, focus. You can push it up until it starts oozing out the surface. In order to ensure, oh come on, sometimes it gets a little stuck. Oh, that's not stuck, it's got. Sometimes the plastic backing on the foil stays put. Okay. Now you want to make sure you mix a little bit of both and get an even blob. Ugh, come on, get off there. This is really thick stuff, by the way. You don't need much of it. It's for seam filling. In fact, a useful bit of advice, since the part B is slimier and it wants to stay in the bottle, it wants to make long chains and stuff like that. You put some of the part B on your piece of paper first, and this will allow you to take the thicker part A and mix up the putty. So let me get this mixed up real quick. Get it nice and mixed. It's just like when you're mixing other epoxies. Any epoxy, you got to get this stuff mixed up very, very thoroughly. Otherwise, it's not going to get as hard. It's not going to stick, and it's going to be sticky for days, even after you wash it multiple times. Then you just once you get it mixed up, I think that's good enough. Once you get it mixed up, simply take it and spatula it onto the model like I did with the Bondo. Wherever you have a seam. Not necessarily wherever you have a seam, because actually sometimes seams occur on panel lines. Nowadays, modern companies are starting to realize that if they put the seams at the panel lines, or if they try to at least, it will end up looking nicer because you don't actually have to fill those in. You can just go over them with a scriber, and then you're done. Okay, almost. Alright, let's starting to look kind of messy, of course, but I promise it'll look great when you're done, if you do this. A lot of modelers actually skip this step on, like I said, really good kits. Instead, they just apply a little extra glue and let the plastic ooze out. That is just as viable a technique as doing it this way. Okay, I am going to let that set for a couple of hours, for about 3-4 hours, and then I'll come back to it and start the sanding. Well, I need to learn to read instructions better. I thought that it said that it was that it would cure in 1 to 3 hours. Paste is now ready for use and has a working time of 1 to 3 hours. Working time. It can be spread thick or thin, blah 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 blah. 24-hour cure time is required for product to be waterproof and for hard finishing purposes such as sanding, tapping, drilling, painting, etc., etc., etc. So, Iron Man is not going to be ready for work, not going to be ready for any kind of work, for another 24 hours. Yay! So what am I going to do in the meantime? Putty's still sticky. Well, I tell you one thing I can do. I can at least work on another model. Got two on the bench right now, the X-Wing and the TIE Defender. So, let's see, which one am I going to do? Well, I'll tell you what I can do. I can flip a coin, or a coin battery, and see which one I'm going to do. I'm not really good at flipping coins, never have been. Say, positive is the X-Wing, and negative is the TIE Defender. You know, good side, bad side, that sort of thing. Positive. Looks like we're going to be working on the X-Wing tonight.